Welcome to the I Don't Believe in Astrology podcast. The podcast is dedicated to conscious souls looking to change the world. Astrologer by day, climate activist by night. Here is your host, Debra Silverman.
I am only human. I have my faults and my shadows that are as bright as the light that shines within.
I just want to laugh. Welcome to the Debra Silverman I Don't Believe in Astrology podcast with Debra's sunglasses on. Why, you ask? Because she's so bright. I had to do this. So we just did a podcast. We're just going to speak to where we were just a moment ago. This is Blu. You want to introduce? I'm interested to hear how you would introduce yourself.
You want me to introduce myself?
Yes.
Oh, well, hi, everybody. My name is Blu. And first and foremost, Deborah and I just released a podcast on my podcast, the Deja Blu podcast, and that came out yesterday. And we've just been riding this wave of so much mutual excitement and bliss and friendship and sisterhood and support since we got to do that podcast together. And it's just been this like continued collaboration weaving that has led us to be in this moment right now. But I'm the host of the Deja Blu podcast, which
Deja Blu podcast, you guys go check it out. It's on Instagram, and every interview, I can attest, having just had the experience, is profound. It's worthy of your attention. But when you tell people what you do, is that what you say? I'm a podcast host and?
Yeah, so I'm a podcast host. I'm also the co-founder of a modern mystery school for women, alongside my dear sister Reggie Riverbear, where we guide women online and in person into the ancient mysteries and modern times and allow them to align themselves with a life of absolute magic by anchoring in the pillars of the temple of understanding our bodies, understanding the microbiome of our gut, understanding our relationship with our finances, understanding our relationship with the four elements, the five elements being spirit, and building an altar, learning how to create medicine music, and opening ourselves up as the hollow bone. We also have incredible guest speakers that enter into the space, that guide us, that are the masters of their own craft. And it's basically everything that I ever wished existed when I started on my journey. So we've created that together.
That's so perfect. So you're looking at what we have here is an influencer who is a transformational unit herself. So in our podcast, one of the reasons I did this to start with was because of the environmental crisis we're in the midst of. And I kept doing research and I was like, when I really got the hard data, and I saw the film Chasing Coral, and the guy that wrote the film and directed it was my first interviewee on my podcast. I was like, why is no one talking about this? Then I looked at your chart with 4 planets in the 11th house, and I received an unbelievable download in our last podcast of hope. Because up until that moment, everything I've read and all of the implications in a hard science-based reality, like dealing with what the carbon imprint is and dealing with the coral, the temperature, like all that hard data, I'd lost some hope. She's choking on her smoke. I like it. It rhymed. Then I met you and encountered you and your team, and suddenly I felt like, hold on a minute. There are beings who are from the future. This is at the very beginning of her interview, and you're going to see her chart in a moment. Blu has 4 planets in the 11th house. The 11th house is the number that's a little off all the other numbers because it's so exotic and different and doesn't fit in, because it's from the future working backwards. She already has the template of what we're supposed to be doing. So when I met you and had that encounter, particularly in the interview, and I watched you, I was like, hold on a minute. She's embodying, and guess what? Today, as we speak, you know this, the first time in 240 years, Pluto just entered Aquarius for the first time in 240 years.
Which is a huge part also of my planet, because, a huge part of my chart, right? There's like something that is in direct I don't know what to speak.
You were born. You're going to learn this when I teach you. You were born with Pluto and the sun standing together. It only happens once a year. So first of all, this one only happens once every 240 years. You were born under the auspicious influence of Pluto, which talks about, get ready, the destruction and the creation of this reality. So on one hand, yes, am I scared about the environment? And yes, have I done the research to really, like, are you kidding me? The next 10 years, and then I met your friend, Dr. Zach Bush, which was one of the most intelligent minds I've ever encountered, and he echoed everything I'd said. But there is this optimism that I feel in you with your Sag rising and that Plutonian rewrite. Essentially, what I feel like you're doing is rewriting what would be called fear of destruction creation to actually, is it okay to say celebrating destruction and creation? I mean,
well, ultimately, it's a celebration of the destruction of all that's rotten and not serving life. So yes, there is a celebration. However, if we're identified or attached to the thing that is being completely crumbling right now, then yes, it can be very discombobulating and challenging. However, it's just a recognition. If we actually just zoom out even further, we'll realize that it's rotten at the foundation, so it has to crumble.
And this is the voice. I'm now going to share with you her chart. This is the voice of someone who has, let's just expand this. Hold on, there we go.
This is the best podcast ever. We get to look at my astrology chart. I'm so excited.
She gets a little excited because her moon's in Leo with Jupiter, the biggest planet in the heavens, only happens once a month for about a few hours. Jupiter going, how big can your moon in Leo be? And then her Sag rising goes, oh, bigger than that. She's a little excited. Her enthusiasm gets a little excited, and it's tempered by, here's Pluto. It looks like a P. And you can see here in English, Pluto's at 17 degrees of Scorpio. And when Blue was born, the sun was at 16 degrees of Scorpio. So here's the sun at 16 right there. Here's Pluto at 17. They're standing exactly together, 1 degree apart. So first things first, you are Plutonian. And today Pluto is entering Aquarius for the first time in 240 years. And this is the entrance of the Aquarian age brought to you by someone. This is the 11th house is Aquarius, is the Aquarian age. So because Pluto was sitting on your sun and Venus was right there, you love Venus, what you love, Pluto, intense transformation brought to you by your life force. Oh my God, don't get too excited. We're going to do that next month. The short answer is, when destruction appears into our awareness and we think about death or birth or creation or destruction, there is a gripping. There's a holding. But you, for some reason, your soul said, I can do, I am fearless. It's kind of, it makes me think of Kali. Is that something you have an energetic connection with?
Well, Kali, she represents the burning away of all that's not serving. She's also a representation of the ego that is clinging on to some sort of identification. And Kali has not been a goddess that I have necessarily worked side by side with because of her relationship with rage. And I have not actually experienced that as an archetype or an energetics that is my go-to. If I'm going to go into the shadow realm and I'm going to descend right into my 4 planets of Scorpio, I'm going to go more of like what I would call, excuse my French, sad bitch season. So I go like when I kind of get sad. So rage is sort of like the Kali energy, but the sadness is sort of my way of processing my shadow essence and my shadow nature. However, I do resonate deeply with the Kali essence of burning away all that is not serving. And a lot of my codes that have come into this lifetime is that I don't have my full hearing. I'm operating at about 30% hearing in both my ears, and that started about 7 years ago. So what I'm actually a representation or an introduction to is the realm of extrasensory perception through based off of feeling. So the way that my hearing is set up is it's kind of like a truth filter. So anything that is not vibrating in alignment, I can feel it, but hear it through my ears, but feel it in my body, so that I am a representation of the closest thing to truth that we can get based off of a resonance of feeling, as opposed to being distracted by our 5 senses and then going array. And so what I represent is coming home into the truth of a recognition of the vibration behind the words, not the words themselves. So I think that this is, and now that you explain it a little bit in my astrology, is coming from the future backwards, because we're moving into an extrasensory realm. as human beings, we have to transcend just the 3D and start operating in the 3D, 4D, 5D and up. And that is the feeling realm of extrasensory perception. And so in this lifetime, for me to be able to merge into this reality, but also have that extrasensory perception, is that my hearing became decreased. But what I do is instead of like a human where I perceive my world through my 5 senses, I'm like a dog. I perceive my world through feeling and energy, and recognizing that the universe is not going to give us what we want. The universe gives us more of who we are. And so that's really the focus here, is that instead of getting distracted by this third dimension, I operate based off of the words unspoken, and then I live from that place and introduce others into that realm.
Did you always talk like this?
I'd say that it's become refined over time. I've done 100 podcasts up until this point, and so I've definitely been, forging my sort of words in the fire of time spent.
What do you remember like as a little girl?
I've always been a very whimsical, magical little baby. My mum used to, I guess maybe this is probably a little biased, but she would call me angel dust. And she just always said that I just was, I never made a fuss. I didn't throw tantrums. I was always watching and observing. And there has been like an ease to me since a baby. However, I definitely wasn't speaking like this, and I wasn't navigated through a spiritual lens not until my later life. So there's been an essence and a pulse.
It's so cute. What is your later life?
What is what?
How old were you in your later life?
Oh, I would say that I started really going down this path around the age of 21.
I knew you were going to say that. In astrology, the first cycle that we use when I teach in my school is what happened at 21. And what happens at 21 sets the rhythm spiritually. So those of us, like I met astrology at 2021, those of us that wake up at 2021, it's the entrance of our destiny line. And it was part of a plan, Stan, which I just want to acknowledge that that 11th house, the level of your willingness as a baby to come in with no resistance. Because typically the 11th house personality type says no to everything. I'm not going to follow. I don't belong. Don't tell me what to do. I'm not going to be part of the school system. I'm not getting married. They have a very rebellious, the way they learn about their realities by pushing off of it. So the fact that you were such a comfortable baby, that your entrance into this reality has been soft, says something about our future. That's what I want to speak to. Pluto's in Aquarius. We're getting the new template. I feel like you're holding it. And part of the new template is these extraordinary senses that we're not going to be limited to just the mind as the resource to tell us what's occurring here. Now we all know in the spiritual world, nothing's what it appears. Took a long time for us to get that. That was Neptune transversing through Pisces the last 10 years. We've reduced our attachment to the physical, and we believe in angels. Most of America believes in angels. They've done statistics. So that was Neptune. But Pluto, the entrance of Pluto in Aquarius in your presence is, let's rewrite the template. Let's do it together. If we could adjust the template that's been imposed on us as far as, to your point, let's start with the senses, where we don't really hear what we feel, our emotional body gets reduced or gets diminished, and we just depend exclusively on how would the new world in your sensibilities, using your memory, if you could, how would humans be different? What would you suggest might change in the human condition?
I think that we're going through a giant shift right now of living from the outside in to living from the inside out. And what I mean by the outside in is that we identify ourselves with our jobs or the amount of money we have in our bank accounts or what we're wearing or the car we drive. It's classic case, right? And we think that happiness lies in the next thing that we accomplish, which will ultimately lead us to sitting at expectation station for the rest of our lives, because our happiness is placed in some future timeline. We're never going to get to our destination. It's impossible. We're literally chasing a carrot at the end of a stick and thinking that happiness lies somewhere over there. When I have the husband, when I have the house, when I have the money, when I have the job, then I will feel whole and complete. But the thing is, and like I said before, is the universe does not give you what you want. The universe gives you who you are. And so if we're bypassing the present moment to think happiness is somewhere else, then we're constantly in a loop that is just feeding this anxiety, feeding this stress hormone, feeding the cortisol that is pumping through every 75 trillion cells of our body, that is ultimately deteriorating us, and we're getting older and aging.
Okay, so what's plan B? I'm so sick of that story. We're all so sick of that story. We want that story to go away.
Let's shift that story and go live from the inside out, which is ultimately making peace with our own emotions. And to make peace with our own emotions, we must transcend the binary experience that there's a right and a wrong. This is the great religion, setting this programming system inside of our consciousness that says, it's either right or I'm wrong, or I'm good or I'm bad. I'm an angel or I'm the devil. And we go in this ping pong match back and forth, but actually the new birth of the Aquarian age is the most sacred thing, is what is. Oh! If I'm feeling angry, it's sacred. If I'm feeling happy, it's sacred. If I'm feeling jealous, it's sacred. If I'm feeling creative, it is sacred. And when I can make peace with every emotion that presents itself within my own psyche, then I can actually start living from a place of full radical acceptance. And when we accept everything that's present in our lives, of course we can accept it within other people. Of course we can have compassion for our neighbor. Of course we can start transcending this judgment and creating an integrity wherever we go, because we've made peace within our own emotional waters. So now all of a sudden, heaven on earth is not some sort of destination or some future timeline. It's here, created through the lens we see life through, because we've made peace with all aspects of our own psyche.
I knew I was going to cry. I was meditating. I thought, I know she's going to make me cry. When the emotional body is at peace with the entire rainbow of colors that comes in every size and shape, then there's no resistance. And when there's no resistance, what is heaven? What is heaven but living in a place, I live kind of in heaven, living in a place where there's no need to contract, where the nervous system is taking deep breaths.
And our body is softening where contraction used to happen, because it's only in the softening does the gift of why it's even presenting itself show itself. But anytime we resist, anytime we fight, anytime we push back, anytime we say it's supposed to be something that it isn't, anytime we say it's your fault as to why this is, and blaming the world, therefore giving all of our power away to do it, that is when it keeps having to circle back around until we meet ourselves over and over and over and over and over again. And so it's in the softening, it's in the unconditional love that we hold for ourselves. It's the way that we hold ourselves like we would if we had a child and she came running over to us and said, "Mommy, I'm hurting." The mama holds her closer and says, "Okay, go soft, it's okay." What would it look like if all 8 billion people started speaking to their own psyche like that? That will end the wars on this planet. It's time.
What I love about your words, and I think why we get along so well, is we both do the same thing. And in your podcast, I could feel you feeling me. And now it's my turn to feel you.
And it's also so beautiful, because we're via Zoom. Like, our podcast was in person, so we like really got to like wave at each other and get on the same page. But this connection's so strong that we can feel each other via Zoom. That's special.
This is one of my favorite questions I ask my interviewees, my podcast friends. Fill in a sentence. I wish people would. You fill in the sentence.
Oh, I wish people would. I thought you were going to finish it. I wish people would stop taking things so personally. And we always go through life and we have this sense of self that we must defend at all costs. And the second anybody else is going through a process, we take it personally, and then we continue to reiterate the frequency of static noise out into the world. But you know what? It ends when someone stops taking it so personally. There is no chemical reaction. We only have a chemical reaction when this person's popping off and this person takes it personally, and boom, and then it just keeps rippling out. But once if this person's popping off and this person goes, "It's okay and it's nothing to do with me," we diffuse the situation. So if people, I wish people would stop taking things so personally. Nothing's personal. We know who we are. We know why we're here for the most part. And if we stop taking other people's reactive nature so personally, we'll become a forgiveness filter everywhere we go.
It's so hard to do, you little smarty pants. That's the right answer. And the ego is so, I'm an astrologer and people come and they hand me their chart and all they want me to do is talk about their ego. And then I talk about the rising sign and say, no, we're going to talk about your soul. And your soul, my friend, is Sag rising, is a spiritual teacher. So get ready. Your gift is a channel to be able to facilitate us to think in a way like what you just said. It sounds so like, because you're such a deep soul. And I want to speak to that when you talked about, what was her name? Sad Sally?
Sad bitch.
Sad bitch. Oh, she's a bitch.
Yes, she is. Yeah, but here's the thing. She goes like if I was to title this chapter of my life, I would say from sad bitch to bad bitch, a reclamation.
Oh, I like it.
Yeah.
And still, in the name of not take, you can only get really sad when you've taken life seriously. You can only get really hurt when you've taken life seriously. When you get caught with your ego, wishing that everybody loved you and wanted you, and why have you gained so much weight, and why are you feeling so tired, and why does nobody want to be with you, and why are you just all by your, that whole ego-centered reality, which is the truth. It's so consuming. You seem to have I feel like you're a secret psychologist from the future who's trying to fix the template of those human patterns, and that you've done it in yourself. And the reason why I know that, and here's where the interview gets a little personal, but I'm not going to use names. Watching you in relationships and dynamics, and when there's an opportunity for you to have shamed or blamed or turned on someone at the end of a relationship, tell me how you don't do that.
I mean, I can tell you, my human is like, what the fuck? Like, we'll pop up and be like, oh, hell no. I call it my sacred, praying mantis. I'm like, oh no, what's that? Like she comes in hot. Like she has a place at the table for sure. If I yell like, oh yeah, you gonna go, what's that? It's so funny. However, the piece for me is, and this is the gene key of grace and graciousness, with the shadow of dishonor. Okay, so the shadow of dishonor feels this trigger, takes it personally, and then wants to blame. How could you do that? How could you ghost me? How could you say that? Oh, it's all your fault why I feel this way. And sends the out into the world, right? It's the praying mantis. However, then my higher self, once I have come out of my reactionary space and come back into a place of heart, my reactionary self recognizes, well, the most dishonoring thing that I can do is to blame another as to why I'm feeling the way that I'm feeling. The second I blame another is actually giving all of my power away to do anything about it. And so I must give myself permission to feel, for example, angry, but in a way that is not dishonoring another, that is sending shrapnel or firearms out into another being. And so if I need to move through any emotion, I'll go and visit what's called Bullshit Mountain. And Bullshit Mountain is BSMT, breath, sound, movement, touch, 4 ways to move and transmute any emotion. So if I'm feeling angry, I'm gonna do some breath work. I'm gonna punch a pillow, whatever it is that needs to allow the emotions to move through. And then once I've come back to a place of honoring what is most alive, keeping the fire alive, but not forming a weapon with it, allowing the fire to burn, but not forming a weapon. Now, all of a sudden, I can readjust the conversation or the situation from a place of grace. Now, grace does not mean that I've not felt all of the emotion. Grace is the frequency that's devoid of all blame. I'm just not blaming the world as to the lesson that I have received, which has actually just given me a lot more power.
Sister, you have power, trust me. It's because of your grace. And the story that I know without any detail was the turning point for me. To be perfectly honest, when I first met you, you're going to love this story. When we met at Gaia, it was just a random coincidence that we were both presenting at Gaia at the same day. We had no idea. And we had a mutual friend who let us know. And the next thing you knew, I invited Blu over for dinner, and we got to my house and did a beautiful dinner. And she came with her friend and I had someone there. And then we started singing and it was so beautiful. And I'm thinking to myself, get ready. This is so kumbaya. I'm going to get pissed off soon, but you can't tell by looking. I'm just celebrating and enjoying, and I'm not really getting to know you really. We just did the surface exchange. It was so beautiful. And when you left, secret out, I judged you. Mm-hmm. I just didn't feel the authenticity. I walked into your house by my own intuition, because when you invited me, I was like, really, am I going to do a podcast? And I walked into your house and I sat in that room and I took one look and I was like, Oh my goodness, we're having a moment. And the whole world opened up. And I got to be humbled enough to say, Debra, and this is one of my gifts this life is I have no right to think I know because I think I know. Wisdom. Part of me knows I don't know. Einstein said it so well. The more I know, the more I know. I don't know. But what I do know is my heart. And my heart definitely saw your heart. I didn't know it personally. I couldn't do my ego attachment to you, but I felt your soul that night and therefore came to your home. And then so announcement, judgments and admitting to judgments and admitting to when you're feeling, the more transparent we are, the more honest we are, the more authentic, and the more we keep trying to heal and try again and stay open. That's the future. Don't take it personally. Keep going. Take off the blame and the shame. No one has the right to point the finger. Isn't that the funniest? You point your finger and 3 come back at you. You can't point the finger without it including you.
Yeah, unfortunately.
So I wanted to share that. I was waiting to share that story and to say to you that your inspiration for me was at the end of that podcast. I had this faith in the future, knowing your chart as I do, and seeing the level of your humility and most of all, how you forgave. Because I personally have not been, I do what you do in the end. I have grace that rules my universe. And I always pray every day, this is a good day to die. And if there's anyone in my world I have an out with, let me forgive them now. So if I did, the karma is complete. So I check in and I review, and every year I go through a list of the people that I have bumps with, and I do my prayer. They don't always answer. They may not want to talk to me ever again, but I do my work on my side of the street. This is so Scorpio. So that my entrance and my exit into this plane of existence comes in with a clean, smooth, soft welcome, not the edgy ones that you go meet all those people. Because when you leave things unfinished announcement, all the people in your past that you have karmic twists with, knots, I promise they're going to be here when you get here next time. Wherever you go, they're going to, it's a law in the universe. What goes out comes back. It just continues. So I always encourage people to think. It's a very old, ancient American Indian. Today's a good day to die, and then to do a check-in. Have you ever heard that before?
I have.
It's very Scorpio.
I mean, it's so Scorpio. If a Scorpio had a slogan, it would be like, today's a good day to die.
Because let's just go there. In your experience, I know that you use, I wanted to speak to this before we go anywhere further. I know you speak to plant medicine, and one of your doorways is to encourage people to open up that Neptunian, because you have a yod. Do you know this? You're going to learn this. You have a yod in your chart, Y-O-D. It's very, very unusual, and it points to a planet. So it requires 2 planets that are very close, 60 degrees apart. Jupiter's at 12, very close in degrees. Mars is at 11. And then the third point is this very skinny triangle that points to another planet at the same degree. So there's 12, there's 11, and there's 12. It can't be bigger than a 3-degree orb, and it's a skinny long triangle. And what it means is you've been pointed at. In Hebrew, the word yod means finger. So it indicates this lifetime, and you were pointed at the planet that rules drugs, Neptune, that you came in to be the go-between. Neptune is the point of the yod, and it describes your purpose. And Neptune is the planet that talks about the use of drugs and medicine and plant medicine to take us into altered states. Neptune rules altered states to dissolve the outer world so we can start to blend. And we can, so speak to that because that's your purpose here, to activate that planet.
I tell you what, Deborah, when you and I hang out with Rachel in my room, we did a 4-element activation. There was some massive, I mean, at least one, but like probably 50 permission slips that flew out of you through the language and your ability to read the Oracle of the Stars. 4E. And that one of those things that you said about this piece about there being like a level of genius in altered states of consciousness, I just felt such a deep permission slip for this piece of me that runs so deep. It is like many lifetimes. It's the realm that my mind entirely shuts off. I don't think a single thought through my head. Everything flows through my heart. And those realms that I go into, blue doesn't exist, my identity construct, who I think that I am, what I've ever done before up until that point, it's just a deep level of listening to that which is needed, as opposed to being a witch, which is a title I've been projected on my whole life. It's like, oh, she's a witch. It's like, no. I'm that which is needed. And that which is needed is just a byproduct of listening very deeply. And so I just listen to the body.
Slow down. That which is needed is just a byproduct of listening very deeply.
Mm-hmm.
That which is needed, listen to that for a second. If you look around your world, that which is needed is a byproduct of deep listening. When spirit talks to you, you listen.
Mm-hmm. And so that's the gift of these altered states of consciousness, is specifically working with plant medicines, is to support one's mind to slow down, so that the feeling of the body and the emotional stories that are listening or sitting on a somatic level are brought up like files, like a zip files that sit in a computer hard drive. And you pull up the zip file, and each zip file holds a memory which has a coding in it. And sometimes, say at 10 years old, there was a traumatic experience, and then I responded to it with this level of awareness that created a corrupted data, corrupted information in the file. So what we want to do is work with the plant allies to support with the mind, quietening down, creating a cocoon. The number one most important piece is the person feels implicitly safe, that they're so safe that they can relax, their nervous system relaxes. And then we open up the zip files where there are corrupted data, information, and we rewrite the data so that it goes back into their bodies. And now, even if it's 40 years later, they collapse the timeline of any of that trauma that keeps playing out and presenting itself in their everyday life, and it stops having to show up. And then they go on a journey of integration, of completely operating from a new state of awareness. So this is how I navigate. I mean, this is a very small snippet of how I navigate these spaces, the shamanic spaces, but the deepest work that I do is when I'm working on someone on the healing mat.
And do you use medicine? Do you use your hands? Do you use therapy? What do you use?
So it's a combination of things. 7 years of my training has been in the ayahuasca space. And what we do is we have, so I've worked specifically with people on called the healing mat. And it's a mat that they lay down on. And in the past, I have learned to just listen to, and that they're also sitting in the space. It's being facilitated by Indigenous wisdom keeper that has gifted me permission to weave my work into the space. And it's just a deep, I mean, it's a very deep interchange, but every single person is so uniquely different, right? The shamanic space.
Are you still doing that now?
I do. I don't do it to just like open as an offering, but if I have like close friends, somebody like, for example, the other day, it wasn't with ayahuasca. This one was a sister that has just recently been diagnosed with potential cancer. And so she was kind of like, her mind was going like this. And so I just grabbed my basket, I put all my tools in it, I picked up my biomat, and I went down to Venice, and I showed up at her front door, and I laid her on the biomat. And we set the space, we set intentions, we called in the directions, we called in the elements, we built an altar.
Let's make it simple. You're a healer, and you've got the gift that comes directly through your channel, and you're working for humanity. So today it's so interesting. Pluto just entered Aquarius for the first time in 240 years. You are speaking the Aquarian language of the futuristic way of how we will clear disease, and how our society will no longer be bound by the outer world, but the inner world's emotional source of where illness comes from will be fluid, and we'll know how to manage that. So if I were to imagine a futuristic world, which you've given me hope for, I would see a society where people understood that when they went into fear, they'd call in the healers, and you would trust the healer because the healer knew their technology, just the way the dentist, just the way you trust the mechanic. These people know exactly how, and there will be this and it will be in a, I can see us returning to the indigenous ways, which is what I hear you speak to. Mm-hmm. The plant medicine is so timeless, and it suspends time and ego structures and the body and the mind. And then when that place becomes available, which is coming soon to our neighborhood, it won't happen without the disintegration of the old system. And by the way, who wants the old system? of having to get scared you've got cancer, getting caught in the negative trapdoor, not knowing who to call to get help, and then running down that medical pathway only to find out that it wasn't as bad as you thought and you needed to have some time out. And by the way, the chemo works, but what would have happened if we would have had a healer who knew how to interrupt? And you know what Zach Bush said? Cancer was related to being the cells being separated, not being connected.
Mm-hmm.
Did you hear that?
I actually didn't know that specific piece, but it makes perfect sense. And that's really what it comes down to, is that unexpressed emotions, stories that are looping now for millennia, that are just running the show, pumping cortisol, pumping stress through the body. It just starts to eat the body from the inside out. So if we are just going to the doctor and we're going to get medicine for our physical body, we're missing two other elements, the mind, body, and spirit. And so we've got to work on an energetic, emotional level, first and foremost, to get to the root, instead of just like masking it. And so this is essentially what the work it is that I'm doing, is when I'm hearing that she's being diagnosed with this, but what I'm actually hearing is the fear, the panic, the freaking out, the cycle, the stories that are accumulating. They're the pieces that I want to get to the bottom of, and then we address the physical being afterwards. But that's really what the shamanic space is for me, is to go into the emotion or the story, and the first original point of that story, whether that story started within this lifetime, whether that story started with mum or grandma. It can go so deep. It can go 7 generations back. And so it does require a very deep level of listening. And it's the piece about my hearing is that I don't hear all the words, but I feel the vibration behind the words. And so it's just about detecting what is the story that's out of alignment or in distortion. And then how can I relax the nervous system so completely that the mind starts to shut off, and we can go in a somatic level and start to rewrite the corrupted data.
I love it so much. This is one of the questions I ask my interviewees. Are you an optimist or a pessimist? How do you feel about the future?
Oh, I'm
I know
so
it's
optimistic.
a question to ask you, but I'm asking.
So optimistic. I mean, ultimately, it is weird and wild being human. It is so discombobulating. It's like, it's like painful to feel the earth. It's painful to feel what it is that we're doing to Pachamama, to our oceans, to our soil, to our bodies, to the microbiome of our gut, to each other. There's so much to be satisfied about. And at the same time, the reality in which I exist in, which ultimately there's 8 billion people on the planet, there's 8 billion different realities happening simultaneously. It really just depends on what lenses you see life through. My lens, my life, your lens is definitely very cool. I see people having very important conversations. I see geniuses come together and creating solutions. I see people actually asking the deeper questions. I see people purging and releasing all that's not serving them. I genuinely see that the world is healing, and I do feel into the essence by nature that our souls cannot be created nor destroyed, only changed in form. And so life is eternal, and I'm not worried about death. So once there's not a fear of dying, when I've made peace with my fear of dying, then I can actually truly live.
And you are very alive. What was my first clue? Oh, the painting on the wall that I watched her painting behind you that was completely captivating. Oh, that's right. We were sitting in her room with this incredible backdrop in her, walked into her house.
Okay.
It's just magic, magic everywhere. The whole space. She lives in a land with art. Look, that's what she just painted. I can't get over that.
I'm going to let my dog out for a wee wee. She's crying.
Middle of our podcast, we're letting the dog out for a wee wee, because the nature of Blu and Debra is authenticity. And if I were to say to this audience, what will give you the gift from this podcast is that unprocessed emotions must be dealt with in order for the new template of the futuristic impression that the humans are longing for. That's Pluto and Aquarius. And I am feeling very optimistic all of a sudden because of meeting Blu and her whole group of people. I see that what I've been doing for this lifetime, don't make me cry, the degree to which I have eaten the poison, you called me an alchemist, and the amount that I've had to consume, and the disappointments, and the death of my husband, and my grandfather murdered, and my father in prison. And there were so many radical, like radical trauma. And yet I was able, with the awareness of what she's describing, that's why my body is so healthy and it vibrates and I can run so much chi, because I continually let myself cry. I get angry. I sing really loud. I get on my bike. I jump in the ocean. I freezing cold water. Like I give myself permission for life to have her way with me. And that suspends time and space and age and all the things we see with our eyes. An entirely timeless soul that you and I, Blu, we've really touched. You remind me of the part of me that is timeless.
You remind me also of the fact that joy can remain no matter what it is that happens in life. Joy and vibrancy and vitality and agelessness is possible, and your ability to stand in the fire of transmutation and just rise as a phoenix over and over and over again is such a gift to know that it's possible. And to have that reference point in my consciousnness just by meeting you now holds a reference point that there's no other path but for me to actually embody this as I age in my own unique way. So it's just such a gift to so many people.
I feel like and for those of you that are watching thinking, I'm not Debra, I'm not Blu, that's not true. I'm not going to let your ego do comparisonitis or try to figure out how we got special, because everyone has the free will button sitting in your back pocket.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as you figured it out, we're giving you the codes, we're giving you the downloads. I was thinking about this today. Get ready for this one. 30 years ago today, I gave birth. My son is 30 years old today.
Blows my mind.
The implications of that is I brought in a being who I saw as soon as he arrived. I prayed every day of my pregnancy, send me a being more conscious than me, that I can be his teacher as well as his student. Every mom can do that. I made it up. The free will button is in your back pocket. The difference between us, perhaps what you see with Blu and I, is we are so passionately inspired by her Sag rising and my Saturn and Sag and her moon and Jupiter and Leo, and I have planets in Leo. We have some similar energetics, but that does not separate you from us. Quite the opposite. We're here to tell you in no uncertain terms, in the name of the future, because that's what this podcast helped me remind you about. Astrology is timeless. It's existed for 4,000 years. And now we're going into the future with Pluto and Aquarius saying, let's see an inspiration by the younger generation that shows us that we really can change the template. Mm-hmm. That someone remembered what it would feel like to actually be kind and know how to process emotions in a wise way. Mm-hmm. Blu, you've brought us the technology of emotions. It's something that this planet was desperate for. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. Putting into my heart pocket. Right here, Deb. You're right here, you know that.
I know. I think there's only one of us here. I'm sort of confused. After we met, I was like, I left that session. I told you this. I was transparent. And I had another very big meeting after. But in between, as I was going to the next meeting, I was like, I need about 3 weeks to integrate what just happened in that interview. Like something, whoop, whoop, something shifted, and I was unfortunately unable to process as I would have liked, but I did when I got home. I had this funny version of COVID, which I kind of liked because I never had it, but it gave me a chance to lie down. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But I couldn't lie down without having that little button go red. But the only symptom I had, I didn't have a cold. I didn't have a cough. I didn't have, like, I was so blown away, but I was like this.
Mm-hmm. Well, it kind of feels like your whole body went through an energetic reset. It was like something shifted, something unlocked. It was like a combination that went locked in. And then the body goes, well, if you're not going to take a break, we're going to make you take a break because you need to integrate this on a somatic level.
That's what happens.
So it's like,
that's what happens when you get pregnant. The first 3 months, 2 months of pregnancy, they knock you out and make you exhausted. It's the only way God knows how to take us to stop. What if we knew? Let's finish with this thought. I wanted to ask you this question. Someone did this to me. I'm going to do it to you. You're 32. Mm-hmm. Imagine, I just want to take a second to go into the future and imagine that you're 20 years away, you're 52, you've been through a big chunk of your life, so much unfolded and so much revealed itself, and you were such a power source, a badass in how you managed your world and you navigated and you choreographed, and now you're in your 50s. Mm. Take a breath. What does it feel like?
Oh, like the finest wine. I'm more turned on by myself than I ever have been. And I ain't got nothing to prove. I don't need anyone to validate my existence. I'm so deeply rooted and I know who I am. I know why I'm here and I know how I serve, that my presence alone without even uttering a single syllable is already medicine. And I feel like it's what you bring into space. It's why it's so tangible for me in this conversation. You entered the space, and I have roommates, and they were chatting with you, and you were in the apothecary with Nadia and having a chat. And after you left, Nadia was like, damn, Debra's so dope. And like there was like this glow that entered the house. And that is what the definition of being the medicine is that there's not what you say, it's not what you wear, it's who you be as the default, just the permission you've given yourself. And I think that this is the beautiful thing as we move through the archetypes of the maiden to the mother to the crone. The crone is so deeply rooted. The crone is an ageless wisdom. The crone is the embodiment of the essence of being the medicine. There's no validation needed. There's nothing to prove. She's living fully from the inside out. And she just smiles at the maiden as she runs around and thinks the grass is greener on the other side and is chasing a tail and constantly comparing herself with other women. And she just kind of... And so that's what 52 feels like for me.
I can see it way earlier. So what you're showing to us, and what I want to inspire this audience to think about is time is an illusion. We have the ability, as you described your 52-year-old, I was back into the here and now going, I think she's doing that. And yes, you know, here I head towards 70. I love saying that. I'm at the other side of the spectrum. And yet you're, when we did that podcast and danced and sang and laughed and why people were responding so much, your timeless, generous Sagittarius tickled my Sagittarius, which took us into this joyful, childlike glee that we're inviting you in and that everyone has rights to. Do not leave it to us. Make this podcast inspire you to realize, wait, if there's a young woman and an older woman who both have committed to authenticity, for me to just spill the beans, for me to tell our truths, we've been so, since we've met, and this is the gift of the future in the name of Aquarius. Aquarius is not self-conscious. Aquarius is the opposite of the ego. Pluto's entering the place where there is no ego. This is the next generation. But what is there? There's a soul that remembers. Aquarius has the best memory in the zodiac. They remember what it was like when we agreed to come down here in a practice of trying to raise the vibration. That's why you're here, to see if you can evolve. It doesn't matter how old you are. It's a continual, timeless exercise. And I have to say, meeting you inspired me back. I mean, not that I wasn't in love with life when I met you, but I got a little kick in my step. Like you gave me some kind of like tickle, and that and your best friends and those, I don't know. I'm so excited. This has only just begun. I can't wait to see what happens next.
It's the best. It's so much fun. This is really like the pinnacle of the human experience for me, is coming across resonant humans that have their own unique medicine and their own unique flavor, and we transcend together the comparison and into inspiration. And it just slinkies each other back and forth, and we just go raise and kind of continue to lift each other up.
Boy,
that is it for me. And actually my most happiest moments are found in the simplicity, and it's the simplicity of just a human connection or a great laugh watching a sunset with someone that I love.
Falling in love. I feel like I'm falling in love with you, and you said that. Like, it's the feeling of falling in love. Why can't we, this is Aquarius, step away from the idealization of the romantic love of the family being bloodline, of the people that you know, that you think, how do you know you haven't met someone that you're going to fall in love with that you haven't even met yet? How do you know life isn't going to come in and hand you a child or a being or a dog or a cat where you're like, oh, my God, my heart.
No.
Be prepared to fall in love. That's the invitation of this podcast. It's a new theme. And that's going to help us through the transition, because we're in a lovely moment right now. The world is soft, but in about 2.5 years when Saturn enters Aries and it starts to get feisty. And then when it enters Taurus and the physical plane begins to change and the security of our food changes and the quality of our air changes, that's going to be a different conversation. So right now, this is the time to fall in love.
Well, it's working and it's happening in real time.
Well, it's working.
Yeah. Welcome to our podcast at Blu and Debra. It was just one long love fest.
That's the truth. That is the truth. Okay, so we're gonna have some ways, just so for those of you watching. Clearly, Blu and I have chemistry. There will be continued. I had the fantasy when I finished that podcast that we did at your house. I said to you, I had never had this thought till I met you. What if we did, Debra, you unveiled or helped me disclose my memoir, and that there were some stories that I could tell that I've kept, because she brought out a secret in her podcast. I told something I'd never said out loud at the sweet age of 60,000 years old. But I feel safe with you because I see that your function in this life is to be an example and to give us permission in a way that we hadn't seen before. So why would I not want to contribute to your cause and give you, give myself permission to trust you enough to show up?
Witnessing that version of you, and what I mean by that version of you is really just the iteration of one of the stories that just make the magnificent well of what it is that you're tapping into and where you're pulling your information from, was such a breath of fresh air and such a profound permission slip for so many of us that are experiencing extraterrestrial, interdimensional, multifaceted experiences, but are hushing it because we don't want to seem crazy. But actually, to be human is one of the most extraterrestrial, multidimensional existences, and we're all kind of just like trying to fit in. But when somebody like you that it has such a deep level of embodiment shares a story like that, it kind of puts the pressure off, takes the pressure off the room. Like it takes the pressure off of where I'm also receiving information from, or where does the name Blu derive from? All of these deeper layers that are not necessarily mainstream by any stretch of the imagination, and yet allows us, once we understand it, to add another dimension of magic into our human existence, recognizing that we're all floating on a massive rock curling through space at millions of miles an hour, held into orbit by a giant ball of fire.
It's 93 million miles away, just the right distance that it never burns us. It just does exactly, and we're all staring at it, every plant, every tree, people here in Hawaii, they lie down and they just lie there staring at it.
Casually.
So all of that is to say, we are going to continue. If you want to go watch that podcast, I did disclose a secret that I had never told before. And it did just explain why Blu and I had such a powerful connection, because part of my vision that I'd had at that moment clearly was resonating to the point where I was like, wait, is your name Blu? So point being, there are more to come. And this podcast was here to inspire you to think about, you don't have to believe in astrology to know someone with 4 planets in Scorpio, who's that Pluto on her sun. She is so intense, with Jupiter on the moons, making it super exaggerated, because you see how she talks, and Sag rising, which is so which is so philosophically sound. Her philosophy about the processing of the emotional body to set us free and allow us to stop fighting. May there be peace on earth, because Blu has brought to us her truth. It echoes in the depths of my soul. It's why I'm here. Thank you, Blu.
Thank you so much for listening. We want to keep this conversation going with you, so please subscribe to our podcast and leave a rating and review to make sure you never miss an episode. Remember, climate activist by day, human by night. Send Debra a DM on Instagram at Debra Silverman Astrology and visit DebraSilvermanAstrology.com. And we're going to leave you like we leave every single episode. Make it your mission to change the world.